Compost piles often test the patience of gardeners. Weeks stretch into months as leaves, scraps, and clippings slowly collapse into dark humus. But across time, different cultures have sworn by certain shortcuts, and one of the more unusual claims comes from the Middle East, where an ancient syrup known as pomegranate molasses is said to spark faster breakdown in soil and compost. At first glance, it sounds more like a cooking ingredient than a soil amendment, but the idea behind it ties into something powerful. Microbes respond to sugars. Imagine a compost pile that heats faster, smells fresher, and reaches that deep black stage in weeks rather than months, all because of one sticky pour of fruit syrup. That's the promise whispered around this method. But does it hold up in practice, or is it just a sweet myth with no place in the garden? In this guide, we'll break down what pomegranate molasses actually is, why some gardeners believe it could supercharge compost, how it compares to other sugar-based boosters like molasses and honey, and what really happens when it's added to organic matter. By the end, you'll know whether this is a hidden secret worth trying, or just another shortcut that sounds better than it works. To understand why it's been linked to composting, you first need to know what this syrup is. Pomegranate molasses is made by boiling down pomegranate juice until it thickens into a dark, tart syrup. In traditional kitchens, it's used to glaze meats, dress salads, and flavor stews. But, its composition makes it interesting for gardeners. It's essentially concentrated sugars, organic acids, trace minerals, and plant compounds. Sugars are, honestly, like microbial rocket fuel. In a compost pile, microbes need both carbon and nitrogen to thrive. Brown materials like dry leaves bring in the carbon, while greens like kitchen scraps and grass clippings provide nitrogen. The problem is that the carbon in most compost inputs is tied up in tough structures like lignin and cellulose. Microbes have to work hard to digest it. Simple sugars, however, are instantly available. When you pour something like pomegranate molasses into compost, you're giving microbes a dose of fast energy that allows them to multiply quickly. That initial burst can kickstart decomposition, at least in theory. Microbes don't just need food, they need the right balance of food. The carbon-to-nitrogen ratio is what determines how fast or slow a compost pile works. When you add a sugar source, you're tipping the balance toward quick carbon energy. That can have two effects. One, microbes reproduce faster, which means they generate more heat. A hot pile breaks down food scraps, weeds, and leaves much faster than a cold one. So, that population boom can also draw nitrogen out of the pile as microbes try to balance their diet, which sometimes causes a stall if, there isn't enough green material to compensate. This is actually why gardeners for centuries have experimented with sugar additives. Blackstrap molasses is the most common, and it's often added to compost teas or even directly into piles to feed beneficial bacteria. Pomegranate molasses is, less common, but its sugar content serves a similar purpose. The twist is that pomegranates also contain citric and malic acids along with antioxidants like tannins. These compounds may slightly alter microbial dynamics, though honestly not enough research has been done to prove whether they help or hinder. Testing this in a real pile gives a mixed story. When a small amount of pomegranate molasses is poured into a compost pile layered with grass, leaves, and kitchen scraps, the first noticeable change is heat. Within a day, the pile warms faster than an untreated one. Microbial activity clearly spikes. Materials that often sit stubbornly intact like lettuce stems or shredded leaves begin to soften sooner. Worms also seem to move in faster once the initial heat wave passes, likely attracted to the syrup residues as they filter down into cooler layers. But if too much syrup is added, problems arise. Instead of a balanced microbial surge, the pile can turn sour, creating anaerobic pockets. The rich sugars, especially if they pool rather than disperse, become food for yeasts and fungi that don't always smell pleasant. Now here's something to keep in mind. Using too much syrup can make your compost pile a bit slimy. And well, that sliminess can attract unwanted guests like fruit flies or ants. So, while there's evidence that small amounts of pomegranate molasses can genuinely speed things up, the real trick is moderation. A light drizzle can do wonders, but a heavy pour, that can actually backfire on you. Naturally, you might wonder, why not just use regular molasses or some other sugar source? Well, the truth is, traditional blackstrap molasses remains the gold standard for compost acceleration. It doesn't just provide sugar, it also delivers essential minerals like calcium, magnesium, and potassium. These minerals nourish microbes in ways that plain sugar simply can't. Honey has been used as well, though it's far too expensive and honestly doesn't add much beyond sugar. Pomegranate molasses sits somewhere in between. It isn't as mineral-rich as blackstrap, but it brings in organic acids that may create a slightly different microbial environment. So, think of it as a curiosity rather than a core practice. If you have some on hand or are experimenting with regional traditions, it can give your pile a quick boost, but it's just not likely to outperform the tried-and-true brown sugar or molasses methods. If you want to try it, the method is simple but requires restraint. Start with a working pile that already has a good mix of browns and greens. Dilute a tablespoon of pomegranate molasses in a liter of water, then sprinkle it evenly across a section of the pile. This ensures it doesn't clump or create sticky hot spots. Turn the pile lightly afterward to distribute it. The microbes will sense the sudden sugar source almost immediately, and within hours, heat will begin to climb. Repeating this every couple of weeks can keep microbial energy high without overwhelming the balance. The most important part is remembering that sugar is a supplement, not a substitute. Without a proper mix of materials, no syrup will save a poorly built compost pile. So, does pomegranate molasses really speed compost? The reality is yes, but only in the same way any sugar would. It's not a magical ingredient with unique powers, but it does provide a microbial kick that can shave some time off the breakdown process. The ancient claims likely arose because gardeners observed quicker decomposition when sugary plant extracts were introduced, and pomegranate syrup was simply what they had available in their region. Today we have more options and a clearer understanding of why it works, but the principle is timeless. Feed the microbes and they feed your soil. For gardeners seeking practical results, the message is simple. Compost thrives on balance, aeration, and moisture. Sugary additives like pomegranate molasses can tip the process into a higher gear, but they are no replacement for the fundamentals. Use them as a boost, not a crutch. The beauty of composting lies in its patience, but if you enjoy experimenting and want to connect with traditions that stretch back centuries, giving this ancient syrup a try can be both fun and instructive. Your soil will thank you for any practice that encourages microbial diversity and steady decomposition, whether that comes from an old-world syrup, a scoop of blackstrap molasses, or simply the right mix of grass and leaves. Gardening always carries a blend of myth, tradition, and science. Pomegranate molasses is one of those ingredients that bridges the gap between old-world practice and modern understanding. While it isn't a miracle cure, it does reveal something important. Microbes respond quickly to what we feed them, and even the smallest additions can shift the tempo of the composting orchestra. If you found this guide valuable and want more deep dives into soil revival tricks and garden experiments, make sure to subscribe to Hydrohaven and share this video with fellow gardeners. The more we explore these forgotten methods together, the more alive and abundant our soils will become.